April 18, 1943. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. 7:25 a.m. The runway is still dark, humidity thick enough to taste. 18 P-38 Lightnings sit in formation, their twin-boom silhouettes barely visible against the pre-dawn gray. The smell of aviation fuel hangs in the air, mixing with salt spray from the Pacific a few hundred yards away. Major John W. Mitchell stands beside his aircraft, checking his watch for the third time in 2 minutes. He's 33 years old, a lifetime in this war. Around him, 17 other pilots prepare for a mission that shouldn't be possible. They don't know it yet, but they're about to fly the most precise interception of the entire Pacific War. Lieutenant Rex Barber adjusts his flight gear, hands working automatically through pre-flight routines he could perform blind. He's young, most of them are, college age, the kind of men who should be worrying about exams and girls, not fuel calculations that leave zero margin for error. The mission briefing was strange. Mitchell had been careful with his words. A high-ranking officer, a transport flight, exact coordinates, exact timing. The pilots asked the obvious question, how do we know? Mitchell's answer was vague. Intelligence. Australian coast watchers. The kind of explanation that raises more questions than it answers. But they don't need to understand. They need to fly. 435 miles northwest, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto finishes breakfast at Rabaul. He's 59 years old, compact and precise in his movements. His white dress uniform is immaculate despite the tropical heat. Outside his quarters, 2 Mitsubishi G4M bombers, Bettys in Allied parlance, sit ready on the tarmac. His staff is nervous. They've been nervous since yesterday when the inspection tour was finalized. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki argues for postponement. The route takes them over contested waters. American fighters have been active. General Imamura had nearly been shot down in this exact area weeks ago. Yamamoto dismisses the concerns with a gesture. The schedule was transmitted days ago. Preparations have been made at Balalay Airfield. The troops are expecting him. To cancel now would signal fear, would damage morale more than any tactical consideration. What Yamamoto doesn't know, what he cannot know, is that his precise schedule is no longer secret. On April 14th, 4 days ago, American intelligence intercepted message NTF 131755, the Japanese naval cipher JN25D. Navy cryptographers worked through the night, among them a young officer named John Paul Stevens, who will one day sit on the Supreme Court. The decoded message laid out everything. Departure time, 6 a.m. Tokyo time. Route, Rabaul to Balalay. Aircraft, 2 Mitsubishi G4M bombers, 6 A6M0 escorts. Even the specific units. 705th Kokutai for the bombers, 204th for the fighters. The intelligence went up the chain of command. Admiral Nimitz reviewed it personally. The decision required presidential approval. The risk of revealing America's ability to decrypt Japanese communications was that significant. But the target was worth it. The architect of Pearl Harbor, flying in a predictable pattern with minimal escort. At 6 a.m., Yamamoto climbs into the lead Betty. His katana rests beside his seat, its white cord wrapped precisely. He settles in, probably reviewing inspection notes. The bombers taxi, the Zeros take formation positions. They lift off into the morning sky, unaware. Mitchell's P-38s roar down Henderson Field's runway at 7:25 a.m. The mathematics of this mission are brutal. 435 miles to the intercept point, over water, radio silence, wave top altitude to avoid Japanese radar. Each Lightning carries 2 external fuel tanks, one standard, one oversized. The margin for error is measured in minutes of fuel consumption. Mitchell leads them northwest, compass headings calculated to the degree. They fly at 50 feet, ocean spray occasionally misting windscreens. For over 2 hours, nothing but the twin Allison engines roar and the endless Pacific below. No landmarks, no radio checks, just dead reckoning navigation that would challenge airline pilots with modern instruments. 2 P-38s develop problems. One can't drop its auxiliary fuel tanks. The aircraft becomes unstable, unflyable in combat configuration. The pilot and his wingmen turn back. The mission profile just became more desperate. Captain Tom Lanphier's attack section was supposed to have 4 aircraft. Now there are 2, Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber. The remaining 16 P-38s continue northwest. Mitchell checks his watch repeatedly, calculating fuel consumption against distance covered. They're committed now, past the point of no return. If the intercept fails, if the intelligence is wrong, if Yamamoto's flight deviates by even a few minutes, they'll have flown 435 miles for nothing and might not have fuel to return. At 9:33 a.m., they reached the western coast of Bougainville. Perfect navigation after a 2-hour flight across open ocean with 1943 equipment. Mitchell checks his watch again. They're 2 minutes early. Then Captain Douglas Canning's voice crackles over the radio, breaking hours of silence. Bogey, 10 o'clock high. 5 miles out. 2 Betty bombers, 6 Zero escorts. Exactly as the intelligence predicted. Exactly on schedule. The Japanese formation flies at 6,500 feet. 2 Betty bombers in loose formation. 6 Zero fighters at their 4 o'clock position, 1,500 feet higher. They're descending toward Balalay Airfield, minutes from landing. Mitchell's voice cuts through the radio. All units, skin them off. The P-38s jettison their external fuel tanks. 16 pairs of tanks tumble toward the Pacific. The Lightnings leap forward, suddenly light and deadly. Mitchell's cover flight, 12 aircraft, climbs toward the Zeros. 4 P-38s, Lanphier, Barber, Holmes, and Hine, angle toward the bombers. Then Holmes's tanks refuse to release. The P-38 wallows, unbalanced, unflyable in combat configuration. The pilot and his wingman stay with him as Holmes throws the aircraft into violent maneuvers trying to shake the tanks loose. The kill flight just became 2 aircraft. Lanphier and Barber dive toward the Bettys. The Zeros see them, drop their own tanks, dive to intercept. Lanphier pulls up, climbing head-on toward the diving Zeros, an aggressive move that draws their attention. He engages immediately, tracers crossing empty sky. Barber stays low, goes after the bombers. The Betty pilots react with surprising speed. They separate, diving hard toward the jungle canopy. Yamamoto's aircraft, the lead bomber, banks left. The pilot is good, pushing the aircraft into a steep descent that might save them if they can reach the protective cover of the trees. Barber banks sharply to follow. The P-38 responds instantly. Twin booms and centrally mounted guns make it stable in ways single-engine fighters aren't. He pulls behind the diving Betty, closes the distance. The bomber fills his gun sight. He fires. 4.50 caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon. The concentrated firepower strikes the Betty's right engine. Barber adjusts, walking rounds into the fuselage, the empennage, switches to the left engine. It begins trailing thick black smoke. Inside the Betty, chaos. The rounds punch through the lightly armored fuselage. Admiral Yamamoto sits in his white dress uniform, katana beside him. 2 bullets strike him, one through the left shoulder, another through the lower left jaw. The jaw wound is immediately fatal. The bomber rolls violently left. Barber nearly collides with it, yanking his P-38 into a hard break. Looking back, he sees black smoke trailing into the jungle below. The engagement lasted 20 seconds. The second Betty, carrying Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki and Yamamoto's chief of staff, banks desperately toward the water. Ugaki has seconds earlier watched his commander's aircraft begin its death spiral. He grabs the shoulder of Air Staff Officer Muroi, points at the first Betty trailing smoke. The words that form in his mind will haunt him. This became my parting with him forever. Lanphier, having broken off his engagement with the Zeros, spots the second bomber at low altitude. He fires, claims hits, but the bomber is already being attacked by P-38s from Mitchell's covering flight, multiple aircraft converging on a single target. The Betty crashes into the water at full speed. The impact is catastrophic. The lightly built bomber disintegrates. Ugaki regains consciousness in the ocean, choking on salt water. Around him, wreckage and bodies. He's one of 3 survivors pulled from the water by Japanese forces. The rest, including Air Staff Officer Muroi, are dead. Above Bougainville, the Zeros fight desperately. They're outnumbered more than 2-1. Mitchell's covering flight has the altitude advantage, diving repeatedly through the Japanese formation. One Zero goes down in flames. Another spins toward the jungle. The rest break off, damaged or low on fuel. The P-38s turn southeast. The fuel calculation that seemed impossible 2 hours ago now becomes desperate. They've spent precious minutes in combat, burned fuel in hard maneuvering. The return flight to Henderson Field is 435 miles of open ocean with tanks running dry. Barber's P-38 shows damage. 104 bullet holes will be counted later, evidence of how close the engagement was. But the Lightning is tough, its twin-boom design absorbing damage that would down single-engine fighters. All 16 P-38s make it back, though some land with fuel gauges showing empty. At Henderson Field, Mitchell debriefs his pilots. There's confusion about who shot down which bomber. Lanphier claims one Betty, Barber claims one Betty. Both can't be right. One bomber went into the jungle, the other into the water. The argument starts immediately and will continue for decades. But the essential fact is undeniable. They killed someone important. Someone whose precise schedule required an intelligence breakthrough and presidential authorization. Mitchell files his report. The information goes up the chain. And then they wait. April 19th, 1943. The jungle north of Bougainville. Lieutenant Tsuyoshi Hamasuna leads a Japanese search and rescue party through dense undergrowth. They've been tracking smoke trails since dawn. The first crash site, Yamamoto's Betty, is deep in the jungle, the wreckage scattered across 100 yards of vegetation. What they find stops them. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto sits upright in his seat beneath a tree, thrown clear from the main wreckage, but still strapped in. His white-gloved hand grasps the hilt of his katana. His head is tilted forward as if deep in thought. For a moment, Hamasuna later reports, the admiral appears merely contemplative. Then they see the wounds. 2 bullets. One through the back of his left shoulder, another through the lower left jaw. The jaw wound is immediately fatal. The bomber relays violently left. Barber nearly collides with it, yanking his P-38 into a hard break. Looking back, he sees black smoke trailing into the jungle below. The recovery party treats the body with reverence. They cremated him at the crash site, standard practice in the tropical heat, and prepare his ashes for transport. But they also suppress the violent details of his death. The official medical report is whitewashed on orders from above. The Japanese public will not be told their greatest admiral was shot down. Not yet. The news travels up the chain of command slowly. Tokyo receives confirmation within days, but says nothing publicly. The command structure debates how to handle the propaganda disaster. Yamamoto wasn't just a military leader, he was a symbol, the victor of Pearl Harbor, the man who humiliated America. To admit he was killed by American fighters would be admitting American supremacy in the skies. For over a month, Japan conceals his death. American intelligence watches and waits, wondering if the Japanese will announce anything. If they do, it confirms the mission succeeded. If they don't, it might mean they're concealing the loss of someone even more important, or it might mean the attack failed and they killed an imposter. The silence stretches. May 21st, 1943. Tokyo. Japan breaks its silence. Radio Tokyo announces that Admiral Yamamoto died while directing operations at the front line on April 18th. The carefully worded statement omits crucial details. No mention of American fighters, no mention of an ambush. The impression given is of a commander who died heroically in combat, perhaps from enemy action during a naval engagement. The reaction is immediate and overwhelming. Yamamoto wasn't just a military leader, he was the architect of Japan's greatest victory, the man who humiliated America at Pearl Harbor. His name carried weight that transcended normal military respect. To many Japanese, he represented proof that Japan could challenge Western powers and win. The announcement triggers a national mourning unlike anything since the death of Emperor Meiji. Radio broadcasts are suspended except for funeral music. Across Japan, bow toward Tokyo at precisely 10:50 a.m. during memorial services. Schools close, businesses shut down. The grief is genuine and profound. But there's also confusion. How did Yamamoto die? The official statements are vague, contradictory. Some reports mention enemy action. Others suggest natural causes or an accident. The truth, that American fighters intercepted and killed him based on decoded intelligence, remains classified. To admit that would mean admitting American code-breaking capability. It would mean admitting vulnerability. On May 23rd, the battleship Musashi arrives at Kisarazu, carrying Yamamoto's ashes. The ceremony is elaborate, attended by Emperor Hirohito himself in a rare personal appearance. A poem is read, found in Yamamoto's quarters on the battleship Yamato. So many are dead, I cannot face the emperor. Soon I shall join the young dead soldiers. The poem reveals something the propaganda doesn't acknowledge. Yamamoto's pessimism about the war, his understanding that Japan was fighting a conflict it couldn't win. But that knowledge died with him over Bougainville. June 5th brings a full state funeral. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo delivers the eulogy. Yamamoto is posthumously promoted to Fleet Admiral, the highest rank in the Japanese Navy. He receives the Order of the Chrysanthemum First Class. Even Nazi Germany awards him the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, presented to his widow. The spectacle is designed to demonstrate strength, unity, resolve. But beneath the ceremony lies a more complex truth. June 1943, Combined Fleet Headquarters, Truk Lagoon. Admiral Mainichi Koga assumes command of the Combined Fleet. He's competent, experienced, respected, but he's not Yamamoto. During his first briefing, he makes this explicit. There was only one Yamamoto, and no one is able to replace him. It's not false modesty. Yamamoto's death creates a leadership vacuum that goes beyond simple replacement. He possessed a unique combination of strategic vision, tactical boldness, and understanding of both Japanese and American capabilities. He'd studied at Harvard, toured American oil fields, understood industrial capacity in ways other Japanese commanders didn't. His famous prediction that he could run wild for 6 months to a year, but after that had no confidence, came from genuine knowledge, not pessimism. More importantly, Yamamoto commanded absolute respect from the fleet. When he threatened to resign if his Pearl Harbor plan wasn't approved, the Naval General Staff backed down. No other commander possessed that authority. His replacement brings competence, but not irreplaceability. The psychological impact on Japanese naval personnel is immediate and profound. The death of Yamamoto damages morale in ways that transcend normal command succession. If the Americans could reach their greatest admiral, could decode his precise itinerary and intercept him mid-flight, what was safe? The myth of Japanese invincibility, already cracking after Midway and Guadalcanal, shatters completely. Japanese naval strategy never recovers its innovative edge. The aggressive carrier operations that characterized early Pacific War fighting
Pearl Harbor, Ceylon, the Indian Ocean raids, give way to reactive, defensive postures. Koga attempts to maintain offensive capability, but the fleet is operating under different constraints now. Fuel shortages, pilot losses, industrial production falling behind American output. The Americans, meanwhile, experience a morale boost that extends far beyond the military. When details of the mission finally become public after the war, Operation Vengeance becomes legendary. Precision navigation, decoded intelligence, targeted assassination. Proof that American technology and determination could reach anyone, anywhere. But there's a cost. Killing Yamamoto required revealing that American cryptographers could break JN-25D naval code. After the announcement of his death, Japanese signals intelligence reviews their communication security. They change some procedures, modify some codes. The intelligence advantage narrows slightly. Was it worth it? November 1991, an Air Force review panel convenes nearly 50 years after Operation Vengeance. The question they're examining should have been settled decades ago. Who shot down Admiral Yamamoto's aircraft? Captain Tom Lanphier claimed credit immediately after the mission. He gave interviews, wrote articles, became famous as the man who killed Yamamoto. His account? He pulled up to engage the Zeros, then spotted a Betty below him, dove, and fired the fatal burst. The bomber's wings separated. It crashed into the jungle. Case closed. Lieutenant Rex Barber told a different story. He stayed low, pursuing the Betty that dove toward the jungle canopy. He fired repeated bursts into the bomber until it began trailing smoke. The engagement was at close range, so close that Japanese return fire riddled his P-38 with 104 bullet holes. He watched the Betty spiral into the jungle, black smoke marking its death. 2 pilots, 2 claims, 1 bomber shot down over land. The dispute consumed both men. Lanphier leveraged his claim into celebrity status. He left the military, went into business, dined out on the story for decades. Barber stayed in the Air Force, rose to colonel, and seethed quietly as Lanphier took credit for what he believed was his kill. The 1991 review examined all available evidence, Japanese records showing only 2 bombers present, witness statements from other P-38 pilots, the physical location of the crash sites, Yamamoto's Betty in the jungle, Ugaki's in the water, the bullet damage patterns on Barber's aircraft. The panel concluded both pilots deserved shared credit, splitting the kill. But the controversy didn't end. In 2003, Oregon officially recognized Barber as the pilot who shot down Yamamoto. In 2024, historian Daniel L. Hallman, a member of the original 1991 review panel, stated publicly he'd become convinced Barber should receive sole credit. Modern analysis supports Barber's account. The flight paths, the timing, the physical evidence all align with his version. Lanphier died in 1987, never knowing his claim would be questioned. Barber died in 2001, never receiving full recognition. The men who flew with them are dead now. The mission has passed from living memory into history, where competing accounts can be weighed with cold objectivity. The verdict of modern scholarship favors Barber, but for decades, Lanphier's version dominated because he was better at self-promotion. History doesn't always recognize the correct heroes immediately. There's a final irony to Yamamoto's death that's too significant to ignore. The admiral killed over Bougainville never wanted the war he was forced to fight. In 1919, a young Japanese naval officer named Isoroku Yamamoto enrolled at Harvard University. He studied economics and petroleum resources. He toured American oil fields and steel mills. He learned poker from American students and developed a deep appreciation for American industrial capacity. What he saw terrified him from a strategic perspective.
When Japanese military planners began discussing war with the United States in the late 1930s, Yamamoto's response was unequivocal. He famously told Prince Fumimaro Kono, "In the first 6 to 12 months of a war with the United States and Great Britain, I will run wild and win victory upon victory. But then, if the war continues after that, I have no expectation of success." He understood what many Japanese leaders refused to accept. America's industrial base was overwhelming. Its capacity to produce aircraft, ships, tanks, and ammunition dwarfed Japan's by orders of magnitude. The numbers looked like propaganda. They were so large they seemed impossible. But Yamamoto had seen the factories. He knew the numbers were real. When ordered to plan an attack on Pearl Harbor, he complied. Not because he believed in the strategy, but because duty demanded it. He designed the operation brilliantly, executed it perfectly. The attack achieved tactical surprise and inflicted devastating losses. It also guaranteed exactly the outcome Yamamoto feared: total war with an enemy that possessed unlimited industrial capacity and inexhaustible resources. His 6-month prediction proved remarkably accurate. Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7, 1941. 6 months later, in June 1942, Japan lost 4 fleet carriers at Midway, a defeat from which the Imperial Navy never recovered. Yamamoto survived that battle, but understood its implications. The tide had turned. By April 1943, when American P-38s intercepted his bomber over Bougainville, Japan was already losing. The industrial war Yamamoto predicted was grinding forward. American shipyards were launching carriers faster than Japan could sink them. American factories were producing aircraft in numbers that would have seemed impossible in 1941. The 6-month window had closed. The long defeat had begun. So the architect of Pearl Harbor died fighting a war he knew was unwinnable, having warned his superiors of exactly this outcome, duty-bound to execute strategies he privately opposed. The death of Admiral Yamamoto over Bougainville created consequences that extended far beyond one man's fate. The immediate tactical impact was measurable. Japanese naval morale, already damaged by defeats at Midway and Guadalcanal, suffered another devastating blow. If the architect of Pearl Harbor could be intercepted and killed based on decoded radio traffic, what operational security existed? Admiral Minichi Koga, who assumed command of the combined fleet, understood the magnitude of what he inherited. His private assessment was blunt. Yamamoto was irreplaceable. Japanese naval strategy after April 1943 became increasingly defensive, reactive rather than innovative. The bold carrier operations that characterized the war's opening months, Ceylon, the Indian Ocean raids, even Midway itself, gave way to cautious positioning and delayed decision-making. American morale surged correspondingly. The mission proved that American intelligence, technology, and pilot skill could reach the highest value targets. Operation Vengeance became proof of concept for what modern warfare could accomplish: precision navigation over 435 miles of open ocean, perfect timing based on decoded communications, targeted elimination of specific individuals. But there were costs. The success of the mission required revealing capabilities. When news of Yamamoto's death leaked to the press in October 1943, with Tom Lanphier's name prominently featured, the Navy was outraged. Major John Mitchell's nomination for the Medal of Honor was downgraded to a Navy Cross for the security breach. The Japanese, reading American newspaper accounts, began questioning their communications security. New codebooks had been issued 2 weeks before Operation Vengeance, but hadn't reached Rabaul in Bougainville. After the mission, those logistical failures were corrected. The intelligence advantage narrowed, not catastrophically, but American cryptographers continued breaking Japanese codes throughout the war, but enough to matter. Every decoded message after April 1943 carried the risk that this might be the one that prompted Japan to completely overhaul its cipher systems. Was killing Yamamoto worth that risk? The question was debated then and remains studied now. The consensus among military historians is yes.
Yamamoto's strategic value justified the operational risk. But it was closer than comfortable. 82 years later, Operation Vengeance remains studied in military academies worldwide. Not because it changed the outcome of the Pacific War. By April 1943, Japan's defeat was mathematically inevitable, but because it demonstrated capabilities that define modern warfare. Signals intelligence, long-range precision strike, targeted elimination of high-value individuals. The operation succeeded because multiple systems functioned perfectly under impossible constraints. Navy cryptographers broke JN-25D cipher and decoded Yamamoto's complete itinerary. Intelligence officers recognized the opportunity and escalated it to presidential-level decision-making within hours. Army Air Force's planners calculated fuel consumption to the gallon for a 435-mile overwater intercept. 18 P-38 pilots executed navigation that required hitting a specific point at a specific time after 2 hours of radio-silent flight over featureless ocean. Captain Tom Lanphier drew the Zero escorts away. Lieutenant Rex Barber fired the burst that killed the architect of Pearl Harbor. 20 seconds of combat. One Betty bomber crashing into Bougainville jungle. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto dead before his aircraft hit the ground, the katana still gripped in his white-gloved hand. The shock to Japan was immediate and profound. When the announcement came on May 21, carefully worded to conceal the violent details, the nation went into mourning unlike anything since Emperor Meiji's death. Not because Yamamoto was beloved, though he was respected, but because his death proved what many Japanese privately feared. American reach extended everywhere. American intelligence could penetrate Japanese communications. American fighters could intercept specific aircraft over contested territory. American industrial capacity was producing P-38 Lightnings equipped with auxiliary fuel tanks in numbers that made previously impossible missions routine. The war continued for another 2 years and 4 months after Yamamoto's death. The outcome never changed. Japan's defeat remained inevitable. But the psychological impact of Operation Vengeance rippled through both militaries. Japanese naval strategy became defensive, cautious, ultimately ineffective. American confidence surged with proof that determination and technology could accomplish missions that seemed impossible. In the end, history rendered its verdict through the men who flew the mission. Tom Lanphier claimed fame and built a career on shooting down Yamamoto. Rex Barber flew his damaged P-38 back to Henderson Field with 104 bullet holes and said little for decades. Modern scholarship favors Barber's account based on physical evidence in flight paths. But both men participated in an operation that demonstrated what the 20th century had become. A war where intelligence, technology, and individual courage combined to reach targets anywhere. April 18, 1943, 435 miles northwest of Guadalcanal. 20 minutes that killed the man who planned Pearl Harbor and proved that even Japan's greatest admiral could not escape the war he never wanted to fight.